Now, she is the host of Sabi Sabs, a legend, actually. Now, it's a podcast. She's the co-host of the Revolutionary Blackout Network. We've had her colleague on. Now it's time to meet her. Sabi, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. First of all, tell us, how is life on the outside of the mainstream media in the belly of the beast? You're in the great Satan. I'm in the little Satan. What's it like being like an outrider, an outlaw in media terms in these countries? Tell us.
Well, currently, right now, it's really difficult because of censorship. So a lot of us that do independent media and are independent journalists, that's the biggest hurdle that we have to deal with. And it's not just censorship on YouTube, it's censorship on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, all of these platforms, especially for those of us that talk about anti-war and anti-imperialism. It's more difficult now to get that message across to people because we can talk about a certain subject. For example, if I talk about Russia, Ukraine, and it doesn't follow the mainstream media narrative, then those videos would likely be pulled or demonetized. And other people have been dealing with this as well. So right now it's been a pretty difficult time, but we're hanging in there.
It's a bit hit and miss, isn't it? I mean, I've been on Facebook for a very long time. And over the last couple of months, I've been basically strangled on Facebook with nobody seeing the posts and not allowed to even pay them money to advertise the clips. Refused permission to promote, which is counterintuitive financially. And yet last Sunday, I had a clip of 261,000 views on Facebook. So either sometimes you get past the censor, or the censor's off that night, or he's fallen asleep, or like Epstein's prison guards, the cameras have switched off. It is a bit funny, a bit hit and miss, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that was one of the most difficult things in the beginning when I first started was figuring out the algorithm. And it's different now than it was 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago, independent media was a part of the Bernie Sanders movement, at least in left independent media. And they were doing typically well. Like they were getting a lot of views and a lot of subscribers. But then YouTube and Facebook, they decided to change their algorithm and make it so that mainstream outlets would be pushed to the top of the search choices and that independent media would be pushed towards the bottom. So now it's harder to find independent voices on those platforms.
And you're one of the best of them, and your show is becoming increasingly popular, I'm glad to say. What are the main subjects? First of all, domestically, because I need to talk to you because you're still the global hegemon. Unfortunately, what you do there affects what we can do here. But what are the big domestic stories inside the US that preoccupy your viewers at the moment?
One of the big ones right now, of course, is the midterm elections that just happened. The Republican Party just took back the House. Nancy Pelosi has decided not to reseat a speakership or leadership in the House. So she would actually be the minority leader if she stuck with it instead of the Speaker of the House. And so that means that it looks like Hakeem Jeffries is next up in that position. He's going to be very difficult to get any type of progressive policies passed. He's against progressivism, a lot of those policies that progressives in Congress ran on. So for those of us that came from that Bernie Sanders movement, and I was one of those people, it's a very difficult time. We've seen a lot of the progressives go along with Joe Biden and people like Nancy Pelosi not forcing the vote on Medicare for all for everyone in this country during a pandemic. They have decided to just go along with the Democratic Party instead of going in there and taking over the Democratic Party. So there's a lot of red team, blue team that still happens in the United States, but more people are starting to wake up to the fact that economically things are not improving. That's why we have a lot of strikes that are going on right now with workers. The railroad workers right now are deciding whether or not they're going to go on strike, and that will affect supply chain. So what we've been advocating for over at RBN is that It's come to the point now where we need a general strike. Voting for people, voting for the president of the United States is not changing people's lives economically in this country when we have two parties that are very much corporate and they support corporate interests and they put the American people last. A little bit different in the UK. At least you guys do have healthcare for everyone there. Now, I did hear that it might be privatized soon, but we don't have that. We've never had it. And it's embarrassing to be one of the wealthiest countries in the world and to see that our leadership doesn't care about the people.
Yeah, of course, we've got a healthcare system that is theoretically free to everyone at the point of need, but it is in such a parlous case state that it is driving anyone who can out of the public health system and into the private. There's now a waiting list to get on the waiting list for treatment in the British Health Service, which has long ago of course, begun to privatize under Labour governments, I should say, key elements of the work. And of course, the more money you put in, the more money these privatized elements are able to take out. It's very big business, very profitable. And you're right, the direction of travel is in the direction of your system rather than you taking the direction of ours. But let me talk about the war, Sabi. It seems to me it's slightly different, slightly better in America than it is here, in the sense that here in Britain, the entire left, so-called, and the entire right, so-called, are 100% behind Joe Biden and the war. In the US, at least, parts of the right are not, whether for good reasons or bad. People like Trump and others, Trump Jr., I saw calling for an end to the endless subvention of billions of dollars to Ukraine. There's more opposition to the Ukraine war in America than there is in Britain. Is that how you see it? And if so, is it likely to grow?
I think it is growing somewhat. It's not growing as much as I would hope for, and that's because mainstream media and the censorship, we're not getting that message out to as many people as we would like, and mainstream media is not telling the whole story with this conflict, of course. But yes, that is happening here. People are getting tired of seeing billions and billions of dollars going out the door to Ukraine when we have people here in the United States that don't have health care. Homelessness has increased in the United States. Our poverty situation here has not improved, but we have billions and billions of dollars to send to people in another country. And one of the things I like to point out in my show are, what are those packages? What do those packages include? Because some people think that it's just weapons. It's not just weapons. They're giving them health care. They're giving them clean water. Meanwhile, we have a Flint, Michigan that does not have clean water still years later here in the US. We have a Jackson, Mississippi that still has dirty water here in the United States. So the military industrial complex here is a big problem. There's a lot of money that goes to the MIC, and that's why we don't have more money that is distributed to a lot of these social programs that could help people here in the United States. I'm not sure what is going to happen, but I think enough people are getting riled up to the point where I think a general strike is eventually inevitable. I think this will happen at some point, but you have to have all players on board. The hardest thing that I have, or the hardest thing I struggle with the most, is convincing people that who you vote for president, if they're running as a Democrat or Republican, that is not going to help you. That is not going to solve the problem, because they are in bed with the MIC and they support corporate interests. Both of those parties are owned by Wall Street. So it's really hard for me to convince people who have been conditioned to believe that when they go to vote for the president of the United States, that they're actually going to make a difference in their lives. And that rarely happens. The change that we get is not significant. It's usually crumbs. And this is why people in this country continue to struggle economically.
How do people follow your work, Sabi? How do they watch your show?
You can find me on YouTube. My channel is called Sabby Sabs, and you can also see me on the Revolutionary Blackout Network on YouTube. A lot of people follow me on Twitter at Sabby Sabs 2. That's the number 2.